The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was quiet. 12 species sat in a circle, each one different from the other. Some had scales. Some had feathers. Some were made of pure light. They had come together because something terrible was happening. The Vora were dying. The Vora lived on a small asteroid called KX-7. It was far from any star, cold and lonely. But the Vora had made it their home for 1,000 years. They built machines to make air. They built machines to clean water. They built towers to talk to other worlds. For a long time, everything worked fine. Then the storm came. It was not a storm of rain or wind. It was a storm from the sun itself. Hot waves of energy flew across space and hit the asteroid. The communication towers fell. The water machines broke. The air machines started to fail. Now the Vora had maybe 40 days before they would all die. The council had been talking for hours. Each species offered ideas, but nothing worked. The Crow, a race of tall warriors with gray skin, said they could send ships. But their ships were too slow. The Drelian, who had 4 arms and big round eyes, said they could share their technology. But the Vora did not have the right tools to use it. The Mithrani, beings made of floating crystal and light, said they could try a special energy transfer. But it was too expensive and might not work. Everyone was frustrated. Everyone was sad. Then the human stood up. Her name was Una. She was short compared to most species in the room. She had black hair tied behind her head and tired eyes that still held a small fire inside. She wore the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic service. Around her neck hung a small gold necklace that her grandmother had given her long ago. The other ambassadors looked at her. Some were curious. Some were not interested at all. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only been traveling between stars for 200 years. That was nothing compared to species who had been doing it for 10,000 years or more. Una did not care what they thought. She had read all the reports about the Vora. She had studied the problem all night while others slept. And she had an idea. "Give us 30 days," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. The room went silent for a moment. Then the Mithrani ambassador made a sound like breaking glass. It was their way of laughing. 30 days? The Mithrani said. Its crystal body flickered with blue light. "We have been discussing this for weeks. Our greatest minds have worked on this problem. And you think your little species can solve it in 30 days? Other ambassadors joined in. The Krell made a deep rumbling sound in his chest. The Drelian clicked his 4 hands together. Even the quiet ones shook their heads or moved in ways that showed they did not believe her. Una stood still. She let them laugh. She let them doubt. She had heard this before. When humans first came to the stars, everyone said they were too weak, too small, too young. But humans kept going anyway. They always did. We asked for 3 solutions, the Mithrani continued, still glowing with amusement. 3 viable ways to save the Vora colony. Your species has barely learned to fly between worlds. What could you possibly offer that we have not already considered? Una reached into her pocket and pulled out a small tablet. It was old and scratched, a simple device compared to the fancy technology around her. But it worked perfectly fine. You asked for 3 ways, she said, looking directly at the Mithrani. I will give you more. The laughter stopped. The room became quiet again, but this time it was a different kind of quiet. It was the quiet of confusion. More? The Drelian ambassador asked, tilting his large head. What do you mean by more? I mean exactly what I said. Una sat back down in her chair and began typing on her tablet. You want 3 solutions. I will give you 10, 20, 50, however many it takes. The Vora ambassador, a small creature with soft gray skin and big dark eyes, leaned forward. It had been silent this whole time, too sad and scared to speak. But now there was something new in its eyes. Something like hope. "You truly believe you can help us?" Devora asked in a soft voice. Una looked up from her tablet and met Devora's eyes. For a moment, she was not an ambassador. She was not a diplomat playing political games. She was just a person looking at another person who was afraid of dying. "I believe we will try everything," Una said. "And humans do not stop trying until the job is done." She turned back to her tablet and started typing again. Her fingers moved fast across the screen. Already, she was sending messages back to Earth. She was calling engineers, scientists, and problem solvers of all kinds. She was asking for help. Back on Earth, it was the middle of the night. But lights started turning on in offices and homes. Computers beeped as messages arrived. People woke up, read the news about the dying Vora colony, and got to work. None of them knew each other. They lived in different countries, spoke different languages, and had different skills. But they all had one thing in common. Someone had told them something was impossible, and that made them very interested in proving that wrong. In the council chamber, the other ambassadors watched Una type. They did not understand what she was doing. They did not know that across the galaxy, hundreds of humans were already working on the problem. The Mithrani flickered uncertainly. "This is foolish," it said, but its voice was less confident now. Una did not look up. She just smiled and kept typing. The race to save the Vora had begun. Una did not sleep for 2 days. She sat in her small room at the Galactic Council station, surrounded by empty cups and food wrappers. Her tablet was connected to 3 different screens, all showing messages, diagrams, and calculations. Her eyes were red and tired, but she refused to rest. On the second day, the door opened. A young man walked in carrying a fresh cup of coffee. His name was Taiho. He was 26 years old, with messy black hair and a kind face. He worked as Una's assistant, though he was also an engineer who had graduated at the top of his class. "Ambassador," Taiho said softly, "you have been awake for 40 hours. You need to sleep." Later, Una replied without looking up. Her fingers kept moving across the keyboard. "The Vora do not have time for me to sleep." Taiho sighed and set the coffee on the desk. He looked at the screens and saw what Una was working on. There were already 20 different plans laid out. 20 different ways to save the dying colony. 20 solutions already, he said with surprise. "That is amazing." "It is not enough," Una said. "The Mithrani said we could not do it. They laughed at us. At all of humanity." She finally looked up at Taiho, and he could see the fire in her tired eyes. That was a mistake. Back on Earth, something wonderful was happening. It started small. A few engineers saw the news about the Vora and decided to help. They shared the problem with their friends. Those friends shared it with more people. Within hours, thousands of humans knew about the dying colony, and they all wanted to help. In a small apartment in Seoul, a young woman named Jiwoo sat at her computer. She was only 23, fresh out of university, working at a small company that made machines. She had never done anything important in her life. But when she saw the Vora problem, something clicked in her brain. She started drawing designs. Her idea was simple but clever. The Vora needed air machines, but they did not have the parts to build new ones. So what if they could print the parts using the rock from the asteroid itself? Jiwoo worked on the math all night. By morning, she had a complete plan. She sent it to the human embassy in Space in another city. An old woman named Bora was reading the news on her tablet. She was 72 years old, retired from her job as a scientist. Her specialty had been biology, studying tiny living things like algae and bacteria. She had not worked in years, but her mind was still sharp. The Vora needed clean water. Their machines were broken. But what if they did not need machines at all? Bora remembered her research from decades ago. Certain types of algae could clean water naturally. They ate the bad things and left the good things behind. It was slow, but it worked without any technology. She started writing. She designed a special type of algae that could live in the cold darkness of the asteroid. It would clean the water and make the air better at the same time. By evening, she had finished her plan. She sent it to the human embassy in space, across the world. More ideas came. A physicist named Hayok figured out 17 different ways to use the energy from distant stars. A teenager named Minji, still in school, suggested using mirrors to focus sunlight. A factory worker named Dongwu remembered an old technique for recycling waste that his grandfather had taught him. None of these people knew each other. They lived different lives in different places, but they all worked toward the same goal. On day 5, Yuna gathered all the ideas together. She organized them, checked the math, and made sure everything was correct. Then she walked into the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. The other ambassadors were already there, waiting. Some looked bored. Some looked curious. The Mithrani flickered with impatient light. Well, the Mithrani asked, "Have you given up yet? Have you realized that this problem is too big for your little species?" Yuna smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had a secret. She placed her tablet on the table and pressed a button. 30 documents appeared on the main screen. 30 complete plans, each one explaining a different way to save the Vora colony. The room went silent. 30 solutions, Yuna said calmly. Each one has been checked by our best scientists. Each one will work. The Drelian ambassador stood up so fast that his chair fell over. His forearms waved in the air. "This is impossible," he cried. Solution 14 alone would have taken our engineers a full cycle to design. Yuna nodded. Solution 14 uses radiation from a collapsed star to power the air machines. It is elegant, I think. The Vora ambassador was shaking. Not with fear this time, but with hope. It reached out and touched the screen, reading through the documents. "You are using the asteroid's own spin to make energy," it whispered, looking at Solution 23. "We never even thought of this." "That is Solution 23, Yuna said. "Solution 27 uses the heat from your dying reactor. Solution 30 uses nothing but solar sails and willpower. It will take longer, but it will work." The Motherring's light flickered wildly. "We asked for 3 solutions," it said. Its voice was no longer mocking. Now it sounded confused, and maybe even a little scared. Yuna sat down in her chair and picked up her tablet. She started typing again. "I heard you," she said, "but I am not done yet." The other ambassadors stared at her. They did not understand. They had asked for 3, and she had given them 30. Why was she still working? Taiho walked in with more coffee. He looked at the shocked faces around the room and smiled. "You should probably get comfortable," he told the ambassadors. "She has not stopped since this started. I do not think she is going to stop anytime soon." The Mithrani's light dimmed with something that might have been worry. "What have we done?" it murmured. "What have we started?" It was only day 5, and the humans were just getting warmed up. By day 10, the whole galaxy was watching. News spread fast through space. Every species heard the story of the dying Vora colony and the strange humans who refused to stop helping. At first, many thought it was a joke. Then the numbers started coming in. 127 solutions. That was how many plans Yuna had submitted to the Galactic Council by day 10. Each one was different. Each one was complete. Each one could save the Vora colony in a different way. The Great Hall of the Council was no longer quiet. Ambassadors came and went at all hours, reading the new documents as they arrived. Some were confused. Some were impressed. Some were very, very worried. In her small room, Yuna kept working. She was not alone anymore. Tayo had set up extra desks and chairs. More humans had arrived from Earth to help. The room was crowded with people, all typing and talking and drawing diagrams on the walls. Ji Woo, the young engineer who had designed the printing system, sat in the corner. She had bags under her eyes and coffee stains on her shirt, but she was smiling. Her idea had become Solution 34, and now she was working on 10 more. Hyok, the physicist, stood by the window. He was an older man, quiet and serious, but his eyes were bright with excitement. He had calculated 17 ways to use star energy, and now he was working on 20 more. Even old Bora had come to space. She was the oldest human on the station, but she worked as hard as anyone. Her algae design had become Solution 51, and now she was teaching young scientists how to improve it. The Vora ambassador came to visit the human room every day. Its name was hard for humans to say, but everyone called it friend. It walked slowly between the desks, looking at all the work being done. Why? The Vora asked Yuna one evening. You have already saved us 10 times over. You could stop now and rest. Why do you keep going? Yuna paused her typing for the first time in hours. She looked up at the small gray alien with its big sad eyes. She thought about the question carefully. Because you said we could not, she finally replied. And because we do not know which solution is best until we have all of them. Humans do not stop at good enough. That is not how we work. Taiho walked over and set down yet another cup of coffee. He had lost count of how many he had made. Also, he added, someone on our team suggested we could use Solution 43 to not just save your colony, but make it bigger. Now, everyone is excited about that. The Vora tilted its head. Bigger? It asked. We only asked to survive. Yuna smiled. Surviving is the smallest thing we can do, she said. We always try for more. The Vora stood still for a long moment. It was feeling something it had not felt in many days. Hope. Your species is very strange, it said softly. We know, Yuna replied. Now let us get back to work. Not all species were happy about what the humans were doing. In the Krull military headquarters, far across the galaxy, generals gathered around a table. The Krull were warriors. They had powerful ships and strong soldiers. They had always thought humans were weak because they were small and did not like fighting. Now they were not so sure. 127 solutions, one general said. In 10 days. And they are still going. It is just problem solving, another general replied. It does not mean they can fight. The first general shook his head. You do not understand. This is not normal. No species works like this. They do not stop. They do not get tired. They do not accept failure. The room was quiet. The generals were thinking about what it would mean to fight a species that never gave up. Perhaps, the first general said slowly, we should review our military agreements with Earth. No one argued. Other species reacted differently. The Drelian were scientists and thinkers. They were fascinated by the humans and wanted to learn from them. Young Drelian engineers sent requests to the human station. They wanted to work with the humans to understand how they thought. They wanted to learn the secret of what they called the human method. The Mithrani, the beings of light who had laughed at Yuna on the first day, were very quiet now. Their philosophers had begun studying humans with great interest. They wrote long papers about something they called the human compulsion. They cannot stop, one Mithrani philosopher wrote. It is built into their nature. When they see a problem, they must solve it. When they solve it, they must solve it again in a different way. When someone tells them something is impossible, they work even harder to prove it wrong. This is not logic. This is madness. Beautiful, terrifying madness. On day 15, Yuna's team had grown to 300 people. They came from all over Earth. Engineers, scientists, teachers, students, retired workers, and young dreamers. Some flew to the space station. Others worked from home, sending their ideas through the long dark distance between worlds. A young man named Suho arrived on day 14. He was quiet and smart, with glasses that were always falling down his nose. His specialty was city planning, designing places where people lived and worked. Most people thought city planning was boring. Suho did not care what most people thought. He looked at the Var colony and saw something others had missed. The colony was not just a place to survive. It could be a place to grow. He started working on Solution 412. It was not just a way to save the colony. It was a complete plan to build 3 more colonies on nearby asteroids. The dying Vor settlement would become the center of a new trading network, connecting many worlds together. When he finished, he showed it to Yuna. This was not the assignment, she said, reading through his work. I know, Suho replied with a small smile. But the assignment was boring. I wanted to do something more interesting. Yuna laughed for the first time in many days. It felt good. Keep working, she told him. I want to see what else you can do. Suho nodded and went back to his desk. Around him, 300 humans typed and talked and dreamed. They were tired. They were hungry. They had been working for 15 days straight, but none of them wanted to stop. Outside the window, the stars shone cold and bright. The galaxy was watching, and the humans kept writing. By day 20, the Galactic Council had stopped meeting. There was no point anymore. Every few hours, a new batch of solutions arrived from the human delegation. The ambassadors could not keep up. Their assistants could not keep up. Their computers could not keep up. 500 solutions. Then 600. Then 700. The Great Hall sat empty most of the time now. Ambassadors only came by to check the latest numbers, then left shaking their heads in confusion. The Mithrani ambassador rarely spoke anymore. It just floated in the corner, its crystal body dim and flickering. Once it had been so proud. It had laughed at the humans and called them weak. Now it spent its days watching them work, trying to understand what it was seeing. They should be tired, the Mithrani said to no one. They should be out of ideas. Why do they not stop? No one had an answer. In the human room. Things had changed. It was no longer a small office. Yuna's team had taken over an entire floor of the station. Desks filled every space. Wires ran across the ceiling. Screens covered the walls. The air smelled like coffee and determination. 300 people worked in shifts around the clock. When one group got tired, another group took their place. There was always someone typing, always someone thinking, always someone coming up with new ideas. Yuna still led the team, but she had finally started sleeping a few hours each night. Taiho had forced her to rest by threatening to hide all the coffee. She was angry at first, but she knew he was right. She could not help Devora if she collapsed from exhaustion. Young Ji-woo had become a leader too. Her printing system had inspired dozens of other solutions. Now she managed a team of 50 engineers who were designing machines that could build themselves from asteroid. Rock. Old Bora ran the biology section. Her algae designs had grown into a complete life support system. She taught young scientists during the day and worked on new ideas during the night. She often said she would sleep when she was dead. Hyok, the quiet physicist, had become something of a legend. His calculations were so clever that even the Drelian scientists asked for his help. He had found ways to use energy that other species had never imagined. And Suho, The city planner kept dreaming bigger and bigger. His solution 412 had grown into a full plan for rebuilding the entire asteroid region. The Vora colony would not just survive. It would become a center of trade and culture for the whole galaxy. "This is too much," the Vora ambassador said one day, looking at Suho's latest plans. "We only asked to live. You are giving us an empire." Suho pushed his glasses up his nose and smiled. "Why settle for a living when you can thrive?" he asked. That would be a waste. The Vora did not know how to respond. In its culture, survival was the highest goal. The idea of wanting more was strange and new, but it was also exciting. Far across the galaxy, other species were feeling many different things. The Krell had made their decision. Their generals signed new peace agreements with Earth. They sent a message saying they wanted to be friends with humans, not enemies. No one mentioned the real reason, but everyone knew. The Krell were scared. The Drelian had become the humans' biggest fans. Hundreds of young Drelian had traveled to the station to learn from them. They sat in the human room, watching and taking notes. They were amazed by everything they saw. "You do not have a committee to approve new ideas?" One young Drelian asked Jiwoo. Jiwoo laughed. "A committee? No, we just do things. If an idea is bad, we throw it away and try again. If it is good, we use it. But what if you make a mistake? Then we fix it and keep going." The young Drelian wrote this down carefully. It was so different from how his species worked. They had committees for everything. They spent years discussing each idea before trying it. The humans just jumped in and started working. It was messy. It was chaotic. And it worked. The Mithrani philosophers kept writing their papers. They had given the human way of doing things a name, the method of endless trying. They believed it was a form of insanity, but they also admitted it was very effective insanity. One Mithrani scholar wrote a famous essay that spread across the galaxy. It said, "The humans do not fear failure. They expect it. They welcome it. Each failure teaches them something new. They try and fail and try again, each time getting closer to success. For them, failure is not an end. It is just another step on the path." This essay made many species think differently about humans. Before, they had seen humans as young and foolish. Now, they began to see them as brave and determined. On day 22, something special happened. The first ships carrying human technology arrived at the Vora colony. They brought Jiwoo's printing machines and Bora's algae tanks and Hyok's energy collectors. Vora workers, trained through video calls with the human team, began setting everything up. Within hours, the air started getting better. The water started getting cleaner. The lights started getting brighter. For the first time in weeks, the Vora colony had hope. Back at the station, the news spread quickly. People cheered and hugged each other. Some cried with happiness, but Yuna did not stop working. "We are not done," she told her team. "The colony is stable, but we can make it better. We can make it stronger. We can give them a future, not just a present." No one argued. No one complained. They all went back to their desks and kept typing. 800 solutions. Then 900. The Mithrani ambassador watched from the doorway. Its light was very dim now, like a candle running out of wax. "You have already won," it said to Yuna. "You have proven us wrong. Why do you keep going?" Yuna looked up from her screen. She was tired, but her eyes still held that fire from the first day. "Because there's always more to do," she said. "Because we can always be better. Because someone out there needs help, and we are able to give it." She turned back to her work. The Mithrani stood there for a long time, watching the humans work. Finally, it understood something important. Humans did not work this hard because they wanted to win. They worked this hard because they could not imagine doing anything else. It was not insanity, the Mithrani realized. It was love. Love for strangers they had never met. Love for problems they had never faced. Love for the challenge of doing the impossible. The Mithrani slowly drifted away, its light a little brighter than before, and the humans kept writing. Day 28 arrived like any other day on the station. The lights were always on in the human section. The coffee machines never stopped running. People moved between desks, sharing ideas and solving problems. It had become normal. It had become home. Una stood in front of the main screen, looking at the final count. She was tired in her bones, the kind of tired that sleep could not fix. But she was also proud, prouder than she had ever been in her life. 1,247 solutions. That was the final number. 1,247 different ways to save the Vora colony. Some were simple. Some were complex. Some were held together with what humans called hope and stubbornness. But every single one of them worked. Teho stood next to her, holding 2 cups of coffee. He had lost count of how many he had made over the past month. Thousands, probably. He handed 1 cup to Una and kept the other for himself. "We did it," he said quietly. "We did it," Una agreed. Around them, the team was still working. Jiwoo was teaching a young Drelian engineer how to improve the printing machines. Hyok was drawing diagrams on a wall, explaining energy flow to a group of fascinated aliens. Old Bora was asleep at her desk, finally resting after 28 days of work. Suho walked over with a tablet in his hands. "I just finished solution 1,248, he said. "It uses a combination of solutions 847 and 312 to stabilize a dying star." Una raised an eyebrow. "Stabilize a dying star?" "Well, yes." Suho pushed his glasses up his nose. "I got bored with just saving colonies. I wanted to try something bigger." Una laughed. It was a good laugh, full of warmth and wonder. This was what she loved about humans. They never stopped dreaming. "Start the paperwork," she told him. "And find Hyok. I want 15 variations by morning." Suho nodded and hurried away, already planning his next move. It was time to face the council. The Great Hall was full for the first time in weeks. Every ambassador had come. Even species who usually ignored council meetings were there. They all wanted to see the end of this strange story. Una walked into the hall alone. She wore her simple gray uniform, now wrinkled and stained from a month of hard work. She carried her old tablet under her arm. She looked like she had not slept properly in days, which was true, but she walked with her head high and her shoulders back. She had nothing to be ashamed of. The eldest Vora elder stood at the center of the room. It was very old, its gray skin wrinkled and its eyes cloudy with age. But it stood straight and proud. Behind it, hundreds of Vora had come from the colony to watch. They were alive because of the humans. They would never forget that. "Ambassador Una," the elder said, its voice thin but clear. "You were asked for 3 solutions to save our dying colony." Una nodded. "I remember. You gave us 1,247. 1,248 now," Una said. Suho finished another one this morning. The hall buzzed with whispers. 1,200 solutions was already impossible to believe. 1,248 was even more ridiculous. The elder raised a hand, and the room went quiet. "Why?" it asked. Its big dark eyes were full of wonder. "We asked for 3 ways to survive. You gave us more than 1,000. You could have stopped at any point. You had already done more than anyone expected. Why did you keep going?" Una was quiet for a moment. She looked around the room at all the different species watching her. Some had scales. Some had feathers. Some were made of light. They were all so different from each other. But right now, they all had the same question in their eyes. Because that is what humans do, Una said at last. We do not stop at 3. We do not stop at 30. We do not stop at 300 or 3,000. When you tell us something is impossible, we take it as a challenge. When you give us a problem, we do not just solve it once. We solve it every way we can imagine. And then we imagine new ways. She paused and looked directly at the Mithrani ambassador. Its crystal body was glowing softly now, no longer dim with doubt. You made one mistake, Una continued. The Mithrani flickered. What mistake? You told a human it could not be done. The room was very quiet. Everyone was thinking about what Una had said. Behind her, the door opened. Taiho walked in, looking excited. Ambassador, he called out. Suho just figured out how to apply solution 847 to fix the water problem on the Drelian moon. Should I start the paperwork? Una did not even turn around. Obviously, she said. And find Jiwoo. I want a complete design by tonight. Already on it, Taiho said, and disappeared back through the door. The Vara elder stared at Una with something close to amazement. You are already working on another problem, it said, before this one is even finished. There are always more problems, Una replied, and there are always more humans ready to solve them. The Drelian ambassador stood up. Its forearms were spread wide in a gesture of respect. Is this truly how all humans are? It asked. Does your entire species work this way? Una thought about Jiwoo, the young engineer who had worked through the night to perfect her printing machines. She thought about Bora, the old woman who had refused to rest while others needed her help. She thought about Hyok and Suho and Taiho and the 300 other humans who had given everything they had to save strangers they had never met. Yes, she said. This is how we are. This is who we are. The Vara elder stepped forward. It reached out with its small gray hand and took Una's hand in its own. Its skin was cold, but gentle. Then the galaxy is lucky to have you, it said. The hall erupted in sound. Ambassadors were cheering, clapping, and making whatever noise their species made to show joy. Even the Krull, the warriors who rarely showed emotion, were pounding their fists on the table in approval. Una stood in the middle of it all, holding the Vora elder's hand. She was tired. She was hungry. She needed to sleep for about a week, but she was smiling, because somewhere behind her, humans were already working on the next problem. And the next. And the next. They had asked for 3 ways. The humans had given them over 1,000, and they were not done yet. They never would be. Years later, the Galactic Historical Archives would record this event as a turning point for humanity. They would write, humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy was not their technology or their strength. It was their inability to accept impossible as an answer. And in offices and homes across Earth and across the stars, humans read those words and smiled. Then they got back to work. There was always more to do.